He is the only American to have served the administrations of 4 presidents and 4 different cabinet posts, including that of Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, Secretary of Defense, and United States Attorney General. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great personal pride for me and for the Harry S. Truman Foundation to welcome to our distinguished list of honorees the Honorable Elliott L. Richardson. Mr. Richardson. Presented to Elliott L. Richardson, cabinet member and diplomat extraordinaire, who served 4 presidents, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Richard M. Nixon, Gerald R. Ford, and Jimmy Carter, and who held 4 cabinet posts, which is a record unique in our nation's history. And in the Truman tradition, he served our country in war and peace. This award is given the 8th day of May, 1987. The Harry S. Truman Good Neighbor Award Foundation, Henry J. Towns, founder, Philip Estilli, president, William G. Chagotas, chairman of the board. Congratulations. We also have for you 2 Centennial Commemorative Awards today. And last but not least, oh boy, solid rock. Statuette of Harry S. Truman.
Thank you very, very much. And thank you very much, Mr. Chagotas, Mr. Wadsworth, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It really is a very great honor to have been selected to receive this award. I'm deeply grateful for it. I shall always cherish it. Among a number of recognitions received, whether or not deserved over the years, I think this will always stand out. Will stand out because of the distinction of the predecessors who have received it, because of the very special quality of the group that has bestowed it, but above all because of the greatness of the man whom it commemorates. I'm also, I might add, grateful in the course of these recollections of my former service that I was in the end introduced as the former Elliott Richardson. Other than that, but no one has asked, what have you done for us lately? This occasion itself is one that I know I will look back on with particular pleasure and satisfaction. Seems to me extremely fitting that there should be accorded recognition today to the veterans of Vietnam, to the people who work in this area to create broader understanding of the role and the contributions of the United Nations, and of the students from many countries around the world who have been called upon to stand and be recognized. I enjoyed having my picture taken with them, each of them this morning. I had barely time to find out who they are, what they're studying, where they come from. They are an extremely attractive group of people, and I feel confident that they will return to their countries, enriched not only through the knowledge of their career activities that will be pursued there, but also able to contribute to President Truman's perception of the world as a world in which we are, in the end, inseparably linked as neighbors. First time I ran for a Republican nomination in Massachusetts a number of years ago, I was being introduced by the chairman of a Republican gathering in the town of Andover, Massachusetts. The chairman was reciting my biography, and he concluded on the note, and in 1945, he was discharged from the Army as a Republican. I did not correct it. After all, I was a candidate for a Republican nomination. Fact is, however, that I did vote for Harry Truman in 1948. And in 1942, and the first real job I ever applied for was a job on the staff of Senator Harry Truman's investigating committee. This, of course, was 2 months after Pearl Harbor. I was just finishing my first year in law school. I had failed through defective eyesight to qualify for any of the more glamorous forms of active combat service. So I did in the end end up as a medic in the infantry division. I didn't get the job. And it would have been my first chance to show that I couldn't hold a job. I met 3 Chinese students this morning, but there wasn't time to ask them whether it's really true, as I've so often heard, that there is an ancient Chinese curse, may you be condemned to live in interesting times. I'm sure all of us would agree that these are more than usually interesting times. Indeed, some of their dimensions of interest must make us all wish that there were a way to require every single holder of public office to reflect no less than once a year and for at least an hour on the public life of Harry S. Truman. His example is more important than ever. All of you, of course, are intimately familiar with his career, so it's perhaps a little bit presumptuous of me to try to single out any aspects of it that seem to me to have special significance at this time, but I would like to try to do so anyway. The first and if not the most important, certainly I think we would all agree, a highly outstanding quality of his was integrity. Integrity, the word itself, as you know, derives from the word integer, a whole. To have integrity is to be all of peace, to be one's own man or one's own person, to be comfortable with oneself. And yet I think it's not generally recognized, at least not widely enough recognized by some of the holders in public life nowadays, that integrity is something you owe yourself. It's something you feel good about having. It's not just a facade, a, quote, public image, unquote, to be assumed for the sake of impressing others or coming across on the tube. It's something inside. And I believe that the American people saw that in Harry Truman. I think it was what brought him from behind in his tenacious, scrappy campaign of 1948. Harry Truman was all of peace. He was comfortable with himself. He was a man of total integrity. The second attribute I would like to stress today was his sense of history. It has, of course, often been noted that he was a serious student of history. But I think it's less often noted what the contribution of an understanding of history can be to a statesman. It's not a matter of learning the, quote, lessons of history, unquote. And despite the Santa Ana dictum and those who do not learn the lessons of history are condemned to repeat them. It is rather a matter of understanding the dynamics of the processes whereby events unfold, and ideas, aspirations of people interrelate, and the forces of change interact. The political, national aspirations of peoples clash and get resolved, whether through conflict or otherwise. To understand these kinds of interactions is to have the basis on which it is then possible to think in strategic terms. I feel certain that Harry Truman's ability to respond to the unanticipated strains generated in the immediate post-war period was a function of his understanding of the forces of history. It is remarkable. The more remarkable, the more you think of it, the more remarkable it emerges as being that thrust into the presidency as he was suddenly upon the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a towering figure in World War II, Harry Truman was able to respond to an even more difficult situation in the aftermath of the war, to do so decisively and quickly. And when you think of his actions first in Greece, the enunciation of the Truman Doctrine, but then following that, in short order, and the creation of NATO and the other alliances, and that carried out the policy of containment. It is, I think, also worth stressing that President Truman was never under the illusion that the United States, even though it then had a greater margin of military and economic strength as against the rest of the world than it ever had before and has ever had since, nevertheless understood that in order to carry out our responsibilities for leadership in the world, we needed to see that leadership as being exercised in cooperation, in association with other peoples and other nations. He was a builder of cooperative relationships. He understood that our interests, this nation's interests, are inseparably related to those of others, and our strongest alliances, our greatest security indeed, lies in association with others whose paramount concern is, like ourselves, with the preservation of their national integrity, sovereignty, and independence. And so it was natural that not only should he be an alliance builder, but that he should have seen immediately, as we have already heard in Secretary General Pérez de Cuellar's message, the importance of moving forward with the creation of the United Nations. The third aspect of President Truman's public life that I would like to touch on is his respect for the Constitution. He was a citizen first. He understood that in a republic whose charter begins, "We the people," the highest of all offices is the office of citizenship. Those who hold public office do so in trust for the rest of us. They exercise responsibilities delegated to them by us. We recognize that what they do because it is practically necessary to find people to carry out functions on behalf of all of us that are essential to the good order of our society. But it is fundamental always to remember that they are accountable to us, that we in the end are the bosses. We may or may not, as individual citizens, exercise our own responsibilities as such, but we cannot abdicate them. They are ours. And he understood that. He believed profoundly in the separation of powers, and he was a good enough student of constitutional history to know that the framers, and particularly Madison, were acting on the premise that the wielders of power would be prone to seek to aggrandize their own roles. And so the framers separated the functions of the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive. But they counted on each of these separate branches of the government to exercise its own functions to the fullest in order to achieve a result among these competing branches of government that would be in the ultimate public interest. And so, although he had served in the Senate and was a respecter of the role of the Congress, he was not afraid in 1948 to attack the 80th Congress as the do-nothing Congress, nor was he afraid to assert the responsibilities of his own executive power to the fullest and to accept the ultimate fact that the buck did stop at his desk wherever the exercise of his own responsibility was concerned. And of course, the most dramatic example of this was the courage with which he acted in the face of clear-cut insubordination to remove General MacArthur, but to assume, without fudging or attempt to dilute it or pass it off on anyone else, the personal responsibility for that action. One thing that I especially appreciate about this honor is its name. the Good Neighbor Award. I've already touched on the role of the United States as a good neighbor. And I would like to close by reminding you of what the great French observer de Tocqueville noted about the United States when he came here in the 1830s. He said, you know, these Americans are the most remarkable people. And whenever in any one of their communities a neighbor sees another neighbor in need or finds a problem to be solved, the first thing he does is go across the street and enlist the help of another neighbor, and the next thing you know, a committee has been formed, and they're beginning to do something about it. That was, and thank God remains, one of the strongest characteristics of Americans. And I think it especially appropriate that that quality should be remembered in an award named for a man who was quintessentially American. Thank you very much.